I am thrilled to have Elaine McCluskey here once again to talk about her fiction. We have The Gift Child, an incredible novel from Goose Lane Editions. I finished it this week. I am just in awe of the writing, of the story, of everything about it, and I can't wait to talk to Elaine about it. But before we get started, I'm going to share an acknowledgement of our land. Junction Reads exists in Tikaronto, which is covered under Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. It is the traditional land of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Anishinaabe, including the Chippewas and Mississaugas of the Credit. Elaine joins us from the unceded lands of the Abenaki people. As settlers and newcomers, we acknowledge and accept our responsibility to care for the land and its resources, while also recognizing the continued displacement and colonization of First Nations peoples across Turtle Island. We are grateful to work in the community on their territory. We also recognize our responsibility as treaty people to meaningfully engage in the continuous process of truth and reconciliation. We urge the Canada Council for the Arts to further their initial response to call number 83 and increase their funding to projects and works that contribute to the reconciliation process. We also ask anyone joining us here today or watching the video to support the work of Indigenous writers by purchasing their books and asking your local library to expand their catalogs to include a wider range of books by Indigenous artists. Elaine McCluskey, welcome to Junction Reads.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm thrilled to get to talk to you again. But before we talk about your book and your writing, I was wondering if you would share what you're reading with everybody.
Yeah, right now I'm reading a new literary journal from Fredericton, and it's called Camel. And I have a rather selfish reason for reading it. I one of the stories in it, but there are some other wonderful stories, and it just started. This is only volume 2. So I'm reading the other stories and seeing what tricks the other authors have. So I'm reading that, and I'd also like to take a chance to plug some books by some talented authors who blurbed The Gift Child. So first, Alexander McLeod, author of Animal Person, and this is someone you've met, Nicholas Herring, author of Some Hellish. They're both amazing writers from the Maritimes. So they were kind enough to blurb me, as did Carrie Clare. I also love Susan Juby, who's talented and funny, and blurbed Raphael. And one last one, if you haven't read little book called Dirty Birds by Morgan Murray, you're in for a ride. It's quite a book. It's set the madness of Confederacy of Dunces with a Canadian backdrop. So it's a pretty wild little book. So that's what I've been reading.
That's amazing. I'm
Yeah.
just for everybody joining us today. Claire Jarvis is here taking Kaylee's place. Kaylee is off doing literary festival stuff with their author, and so Claire is going to put all of that information into the chat. I am excited to hear you read, excited to hear what you've chosen to read from The Gift Child. But before I do that, I'm just going to share your biography with everybody. Elaine McCluskey writes about the people you might find in the corners of life, boxers, bouncers, and dreamers. She has published 4 acclaimed short story collections: Raphael Has Pretty Eyes, Hello, Sweetheart, Valerie the Great, and The Watermelon Social, and 3 novels: The Gift Child, Going Fast, and The Most Heartless Town in Canada. Raphael Has Pretty Eyes won the 2023 Alistair MacLeod Prize for Short Fiction. Her stories have appeared in over 20 literary journals, including Room, the Dalhousie Review, Subterrane, the Antigonish Review, the Fiddlehead, and Other Voices, plus anthologies. One story was a Journey Prize finalist. Another placed second in the Fish International Contest in Ireland. McCluskey won the Other Voices short story contest and the Pottersfield Portfolio contest. She lives in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and you can find out more about Elaine and all of her writing at www.elainemccluskey.ca.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. So over to me.
Over to you. Yes. yes.
Lovely, lovely. I was spellbound. It was such a wonderful introduction. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just set up the book a tiny bit before I read, if that's all right.
Mhm.
The Gift Child's written in the first person. So the narrator is a 52-year-old woman named Harriett Schwinn, who's attempting to write a family memoir. So Harriett, a former photojournalist, lives in Dartmouth, which is technically part of Halifax, although the Dartmouth separatists refuse to accept that. She embarks on this journey, the memoir journey, after her life hits a series of speed bumps. Her glamorous husband leaves her, she loses her newspaper job, and her mother, the good person in the family, dies. And then her oddball cousin Graham disappears with a tuna head in the basket of a delivery bicycle. Graham, who was last seen in the small fishing village of Pollock Passage, where he grew up. So it all piles up on Harriet, and she asks herself, as I'm sure many of us have in our points in our life, what's wrong with us? So Harriet goes back to her family. She thinks there must be something there, genetic or environmental, and she has a very strong suspicion that her father, Stan, a local celebrity and TV host, is the problem. He's responsible for everything, and that may or may not be true. The book follows Harriet as she tries to find out what happened to Graham, and it becomes a search for her cousin, her family's story, and more importantly, for herself. So, one of the things that this book wrestles with is truth. Because truth, I guess you could call Harriet a postmodernist writer who thinks that truth is flexible and untrustworthy. She doesn't think of herself that way, but there's a lot to do with truth in the book. So I'm going to read a little prologue written by Harriet to explain her feelings about truth. Most of this book I wrote from memory, aided by notes and observations. I wrote as truthfully as I could, knowing that my memory is as imperfect as I am, a mess of bad clothes and bad decisions and men I should never have trusted. Other parts wrote themselves, and they may be true. They may be life correcting itself. You can decide. Lying runs in my family, and I try not to lie. But truth is complicated. Your truth, my truth, the best truth. When I was writing this memoir, wondering how many choices I had left and who I could blame for my existential crisis, I asked myself, how could any of us survive if there was only one truth, an absolute truth that does not allow for karma, mercy, or redemption, a truth that denies us a guardian angel? At the center of this family memoir is my celebrated father, Stan Schwinn, whom you may have heard of. I started this book with a true scene involving my cousin, the unlikeliest of anti-heroes, and I end it as I must with me. So now we will go to the opening scene in the book. And in the book, there are scenes entitled What Happened, and then other scenes, What Could Have Happened or What Should Have Happened. So this is one of these, what happened according to witnesses. A tuna head, a silvery gray head with two dull eyes, as big as a $40 piñata, as dead as yesterday's dreams, in the basket of Graham's bicycle, wrapped in a clear plastic bag, a great disembodied reminder that some days were better than others, some days were worth getting out of bed for. Graham had ridden a Schwinn delivery bicycle onto the wharf of Pollock Passage, population 300. Two tuna, word was, worth a small fortune in New York or Japan. The bite of the morning had given way to excitement, an excitement that could not be marred by worry or the Captain Morgan shakes. Graham waited until they unloaded the two 400-pound tuna. He waited until they cut off the conical heads. He waited until they hung the muscular fish so that the blood drained the way it was supposed to, not pooling and tainting the taste. The dead head, the one that ended up in Graham's basket, had been cut clean off at an angle behind the gill plates. It had a large mouth and a pineal window for navigation. So tell me, a man asked, on an iPhone video from the morning, why they give it to you. Because Jesus H. Christ was busy. Okay, Graham, I was only asking, and I was only telling. Graham was wearing a faded green t-shirt with white iron-on lettering. Graham on the back and on the front, fast cars, hot women. This is the last image anyone has of Graham before he was swallowed by the fog, vanishing as mysteriously as the UFO that crashed into the mendacious waters of nearby Shag Harbor, leaving a ripple of backward glances for over 50 years. Graham, with a tuna head, gulls circling. People at the wharf described the scene in detail after Graham was reported missing. While trying out a new iPhone, a deckhand had shot a 4-minute video. It captured Graham's flip exchange and his departure with the tuna head. It put me in the mind of E.T., the deckhand told the investigating Mountie, an officer named Ostapchuk, when Buddy had that alien fella on the front of his bike. That is how I wrote this scene from others' recollections. The air would have smelled like kelp and hard-earned money. There would have been boats all around, tied up so tight that you could hop across them. Cape Islanders, painted billiard ball colors with whimsical names like Stairway to Heaven. If you were a city person like me, a person who did not know that you should never watch a loved one's boat steam from sight, a person who strays off the path when no one is looking, you might occupy yourself by noting names and pondering their meanings. Aquaholic, Margarita 2. 3 A's in a name is lucky, they say. You might get lost in their imagined stories. Pollock Passage is a 3-hour drive from Halifax. Look for the roadside sign that says, Christ died for our sins, and the house selling miniature lighthouses. I cannot tell you if the man who questioned Graham in the video was the resident troublemaker, the local menace who stole dogs, aggravated people, and accidentally set himself on fire until someone stabbed him at a party. Every village has one, dead or alive. I cannot tell you what Graham intended to do with his prize. I'd like to, but I can't. In 1979, a man from my hometown of Dartmouth landed a bluefin that weighed 1,496 pounds and wrote a book about it. The landing of a tuna of any size is an event, known for their strength and speed. They have been clocked at 88 kilometers an hour. The bluefin is a formidable opponent with a mystique rich enough to have lured the notable and the notorious to these shores. Ernest Hemingway, Al Capone, Habs icon Jean Beliveau, photographed with a 790-pounder. Maybe giving the tuna head to Graham was a sacrifice, a ritualistic gesture. I don't know. All I have is this scene constructed with equal degrees of truth and probability. Maybe in a kinder world, a more forgiving world, Graham's days might have played out differently. He might not have vanished. It was foggy, that I know. And when the fog rolls in, the kind of fog that dampens your hair and reduces your world to square meters, some feel beaten, others feel free. Free from the need to paint the shed, free to not appear preternaturally happy, free to trudge through the half-light the way they want to, knowing we are all one unnumbered heartbeat away from the end. Fog puts things in perspective, the inevitable, the Instagram illusions, and sometimes fog lets evil creep in like a plague. So that is the opening of the book. And if there's time, I can read another section. Yes? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to go back in time. We're going back to time before Graham disappears on the wharf. So Graham grew up in Pollock Passage, and Harriet's father, Stan, decided it was going to be a good idea to move Graham into the city. Turned out not to be a good idea, but he does that surreptitiously, as he does everything in life. He doesn't think any rules apply to him. So here is the scene when Harriett and her brother Peter discover that Stan has brought Graham to the city. Nobody knew why my father stole Graham, but one day there he was in Stan's living room in Dartmouth, as thin as a dying birch tree, as coarse as a pair of old wool pants. It was 9 months before Graham's disappearance, which Pollock Passage talked about as long as it talked about the last blue lobster, then rarely, if at all. "Hey," Graham barked by way of greeting when he saw me. "Hello, Graham." It was clear from his clothes and his demeanor that Graham was not from the city. It was clear that all of this, whatever it was a bad idea. "Happy birthday," Graham said. It wasn't my brother Peter's birthday, not mine, December 12th. Peter and I had agreed to stop by our father's house for cake. Just me and him, we had thought. Peter and I arrived at the same time, climbing the front steps and entering the house our parents purchased when I was 2, a suburban split with 3 bedrooms, a den, and a basement Peter had once turned into a gym. Out front, our mother had planted a hydrangea, which blushed pink in September, the blooms ending up on a table. After removing our boots in the hallway, we sat across from Graham, uneasy. If you knew my father the way I do, you would understand why. With Stan, you never knew what movie you were in. Was this Network or Willy Wonka? Our father was occupied in the kitchen. Graham was seated on the floral sofa, directly under a $4,000 watercolor of a shaggy Sable Island pony. He had left a pair of lined green rubber boots in the hallway. There was a hole in the heel of one of his gray work socks. I had not seen Graham in over 20 years. He was, it later emerged, not exactly who he appeared to be on this day. He was a person who easily acquired questionable friends and questionable nicknames. Slick, Damien the Devil Child, the missing link. He was complicated. Since our mother's death, the house smelled different. It smelled like cooking oil and ennui, stale stories. On the dining room table, where Mother had once set her all-white bone china, was a stack of papers. On the hutch was a photo of our parents on their 50th anniversary, Stan's arm draped around Mother too possessively, too demonstrably, as though he was proving something. Next to them, a photo of a monkey in a straw hat with a chin strap. I hated that monkey. Before Peter and I had time to dwell on our cousin's presence, our father, a once famed broadcaster and personality whose face had graced billboards, entered the room. Bypassing normal conversation, he took the floor. "I remember this day 55 years ago," Stan announced, looking vaguely in Peter's direction, as though Peter may or may not have been there. "It was stormy as hell. I was interviewing Hank Snow in the old studio. I got the call that your mother was in the hospital, but there were no cabs. When Stan had an audience, he extended some words. He artfully clipped others for effect." "Ah," muttered Peter. "By the time I got there, one ear was frozen." Stan was using his on-air voice, the one with the built-in diaphragm microphone, wiped clean of a Pollock Passage accent. "The cold, I could tell you. Not like today. Actually, it was just like today, cold." But no one bothered to tell Stan, who told the same story every year, always with him, not Peter, in the starring role. Peter was a bit player, a catalyst. Some years my father told the story of how baby Peter fell out a window, fracturing his skull in 2 places, and Stan raced to save him, but not today. Peter half smiled the way he was supposed to. Graham stared spookily at my brother. Our cousin was in the wrong seat. Visitors sat in the white velveteen wingback by the bay window. Through the shears, you could see the house where a Mr. Shrum, once the cause of a momentous stand meltdown, lived before the paramedics took him away in an ambulance. As Shrum was being stretchered, my father stood outside and clapped. Shrum's son, an actor who had starred in a morose biopic about a child TV star, showed up late, high and wearing a check scarf. When Shrum failed to return from the hospital, Stan scoffed. I thought that man was too lazy to die. So, this is my reading.
So good. Oh my gosh. I wish, I wish I could write half as perfectly as that.
Oh,
Thanks for sharing that opening section. I thought it was
okay.
so it was great. I just want to show everybody that the visual of it, that it's just
Ah,
this section that
mhm,
I thought was a brilliant introduction to the tone and the feeling and everything that we were about to experience.
mhm,
Um, so Harriet Swim wants to write a memoir, and The Gift Child is the result of all her thinking about writing a memoir and may in fact be the memoir itself. Can you talk about the choice? This idea comes to you, Harriet Swim is born into your brain. How did you know that you were going to set it up this way? That you were gonna set it up as this memoir, maybe
Um, I
novel.
didn't know at first. I knew it was going to be first person because I just kind of felt Harriet's voice. I felt Harriet, and I felt that I could put something of myself in Harriet's voice.
Mhm.
Harriet has a similar sense of humor. There are things similar to myself. So I didn't really know it was going to be a memoir. The other thing I didn't know, the little piece I wrote at the front in both Truth, I wrote that well after the first draft. So it was with my editor. I have an amazing editor, Bethany Gibson, and I do this trick in the book, what happened and what could have happened.
Mhm.
So we go back and forth. And Bethany, we weren't sure that the reader was going to buy that necessarily. So that's why I wrote the section on truth, to explain that truth sometimes is too harsh and too cruel, and maybe we need mercy and a second chance in life. So that's why I did that part of the book.
Right.
But when it was going to be a memoir, I guess pretty early on, pretty early on. I just wanted to be able to be first person and use her voice, which is kind
Yeah.
of my voice. Yeah.
Yeah. And that I love that play between the actual truth and the emotional truth. The fact that
Yes.
I mean, the fact that almost any memoir, arguably, that we've ever read could in fact not be true.
Right.
Is something I think about quite often, something maybe people don't think about, but I felt like, and what we were talking about before people came, and what I have talked about this book is that this feels more true than an actual memoir, more true because Harriet tells us at various different, various places throughout the novel, I lied. I didn't tell you
Mm,
the entire truth.
right.
I'm an unreliable narrator. She keeps,
Right.
self-reflecting
Mm-hmm.
this unreality of the story that she's
Yes.
telling,
Mm-hmm.
which in the end actually makes her the most reliable narrator
Mm-hmm.
because she ends up conveying an emotional truth that is more representative of the actual truth, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense, but
Yeah.
she
That's a
ends up
brilliant summation. Yeah.
she
Mm-hmm.
ends up conveying an emotional truth that I don't know was a little more piercing maybe as a
Mm-hmm.
reader. So were you thinking about that when she was admitting all the way along
I
that
knew
reliable?
I knew in the end that the real truth of the book was not um, the truth that she thought she was seeking. She
Mhm.
thought she was seeking the truth about Stan and Stan's origins and his family's origin. And she makes a huge discovery about Stan,
Mhm.
and doesn't really change anything. So then she realizes, Stan's not necessarily the problem. She has a big problem in her own life, and that's when she basically forces herself to say, hey, this is what's really happening with me, and this is what I'm dealing with. And the unreliable narrator, she even says at one point, okay, maybe this makes me an unreliable narrator. Maybe you don't want to believe anything I have to say now. So I thought about that. But a lot of times, I think this isn't her case, but a lot of times with the truth, people believe things. Maybe it's just been their family myth or the family story, and it's not really true. I've known people really benign things that they believe to be true that aren't true, and then big things that they believe to be true that aren't true. So she comes to when she it's almost like a confession at the end when she says, "Look, Stan's not the problem. He's a problem, but he's not the problem. Here's what's really going on with my life, and this is what really happened to me. And if you don't want to believe me, sorry, but this is my truth." Yeah.
Yeah. And that the unreliable narrator, the reason
Mhm.
Harriet is familiar with it is because she's in this writer's workshop, right?
Right. Yes.
Workshop
Yes.
led by Pamela, who's
Hmm.
a genius writer,
Yeah.
and all of these other writers who are writing interesting stories,
Sure.
or could be interesting stories. And so that's like an added layer
Mm.
to this memoir, is that
Yeah.
she's also a writer trying to be a writer and
Yeah.
trying to fulfill the expectations of not just her
Yeah.
writers group, but those early writerly expectations we have of ourselves, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. The writing workshop was fun to weave into the book. I've taught quite a few of them,
Okay.
so I was borrowing from that. And the when Pamela explains to them the concept of an unreliable narrator, one of the participants, who's a retired chemistry professor, lovely man, but not much of a writer, says, "I can't see that working." I just can't see that working. So I had some fun with the writing workshop. They're all nice, friendly people, but they're all at various stages of development in their writing careers. And he didn't see that working at all. So,
Right. Yeah.
so I had fun with that.
No, it was great.
Yeah.
So this is very much a Nova Scotia story, I guess. Um,
Mhm.
on page 141, Harriet says, Nova Scotians will nod at a stranger. They will hold open the door, but they will not stare a stranger straight in the face and say,
Mhm.
it's a fine day to be taking photos by the ocean. That was such
Right.
a great little scene.
Thank
But I
you.
wanted to know, because this is such a like Dartmouth story,
Hmm.
when you were writing, were you thinking to yourself, this is how it's going to be received here at home? This is how it's going to be received elsewhere? Or was that something that just didn't even cross your mind?
I quite foolishly didn't think of either of those things. I just, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm going in boots, with both boots, and I think people in Nova Scotia will like it. I think it'll translate outside the province, but I don't know. This is just what I was going to write, and I just, as I said, jumped in with both boots. So it's as you noted, it's half of the book is in, well, not half, but most of it is in Dartmouth, and then the other half is in Pollock Passage. And I located Pollock Passage very close. It's imaginary, obviously, very close to Shag Harbor, which is not imaginary. And Shag Harbor just had their latest UFO get-together symposium. So they have these every year. So it's a big thing down there. So that worked as well. I got to have some fun with the Shag Harbor. I went to the museum and did all those things. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
That,
next time I will think about what people will think about the book.
but I don't know if it's, I don't think it's necessary. I'm
No.
a person who has, I think our daughter lived there for 3 months, but we like to say
Oh, okay.
2.5 minutes. But my experience comes from hiking in Cape Breton. I
Ah,
like there
beautiful.
were many moments when I texted my husband with some laugh out loud scenes, some laugh out loud dialogue.
Hmm.
So I don't know if it if it I don't know if it matters so much
Hmm.
you thinking about the reader.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's so character driven that
yeah,
the localness, I don't think it takes away from the book. I think it's so character driven. It's Harriet and it's Stan
yeah,
and to some extent it's Graham. So I thought I thought the setting worked and I thought it and enjoyed the setting. So yeah, I
yeah,
was happy, very happy with it.
yeah.
Pollock Passage was a lot of fun. So
It
yeah,
did first. I think it worked for
yeah,
sure. I want
yeah.
to talk to you about the characters because the
Okay.
novel is filled with the most incredible characters. Whether
Hmm.
we can describe them as inconsequential or consequential, I don't know. But
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
want to share again. This is the first time, and if you're watching this, this is the first time I've pulled so many quotes out of a
Hmm.
book that I'm talking about. But I want to share this from the book that describe Dartmouth people as one of four types. A, the regular people, the vast majority, who enjoy the reasonable housing costs and the abundance of lakes. B, the militants who are still mad about amalgamation. C, the families who believe they are Dartmouth royalty due to historic nonsense nobody cares about. And D, the arrivistes like Corey,
Hmm.
St. Clair, Scudder, and Graham, who are not from Dartmouth but manage to cause as much trouble. The
Yes.
novel has all of these people. And again, this is probably more of a writerly question. Apologies for everyone watching. When did these characters arrive for you? And how did you know when they were going to arrive and exist for the reader in the book?
Well, Corey St. Clair Scudder is a skeet and a car thief, and he not to give too much away, he stole Harriet's car.
Mhm.
So he comes back in numerous incarnations throughout the book. So he was I liked him. He was bad. Um, some of the other characters, I guess once I get to Pollock Passage, I started adding people.
Mhm.
And one of my favorites were the Bittenbenders, the couple, the rich Americans. They were fun. So they just, I think I have a slightly overactive brain. So these people kept walking into the room and I kept putting them into fun places in the book. So yeah, they were just there. But yeah, the Dartmouth description is kind of funny because my mother actually was the last mayor of Dartmouth.
Oh,
So
wow.
so it's kind of funny because when I talk about the people who think they're Dartmouth royalty, that's not us, but there are people who think they're Dartmouth royalty because somebody was involved in a sawmill 200 years ago. So anyway, yeah, so that's
Yeah.
Dartmouth.
Well, and the characters play on this theme that you have throughout the book. Again, whether this is about truth or
Hmm.
authenticity or however you want to describe yourself when you're being honest, all of those characters play it's and Harriet says it a few times throughout the book that you never really know somebody as well as their or your family never knows you as well as they think they do or you never know yourself as well as you think you do and so these
Hmm.
characters I kind of felt were were ways of the reader seeing Harriet in how Harriet was seeing them
Ah, yes, that's
reflected
a very
off
good
of her.
observation. Yeah, her feelings about them give you some insight into her values and her beliefs. So yeah, like so she thinks Corey St. Clair Scudder is a total skeeb, which he is. So we can and she knew she used to cover courts when she was a photojournalist, so she had a lot of feelings about that. So yeah, that's a good observation. They are reflecting parts of her by her assessment of them and her description of them.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And how she sees her I guess how she sees um Jack
Mm.
then as a result Jack is the husband that is stolen from her
Hmm.
but how she sees herself reflected off of Jack's new life
Right.
with the new wife
Hmm.
baby I
Mm-hmm.
thought was really poignant in a way
Mm.
that moves towards sadness, I guess. This idea
Mm.
that she's suffered this incredible loss, not just the loss of a marriage, but she's
Mm.
suffered like she's lost what was once probably a great hope, maybe.
I think that was the sad part of the book, to be
Hmm.
honest. Anything that happens to Stan, I don't think anybody's going to shed any tears, or they're not going to be emotionally disturbed by it because he's bulletproof. He is such an ego that the ego just protects him from everything. He has no self-awareness because he's such a narcissist. But Harriet's not like that. So when Harriet tells her heartbreak, I thought it was quite sad.
Hmm.
I felt sad writing that section.
Yeah, it was.
Mhm.
Even though I found it funny, her
Yeah,
Jack is a person who goes on hour-long runs.
yeah,
When she talks
yeah,
about that, I thought it was
yeah,
kind of funny. In
yeah,
when she gets kind of um pithy and judgmental about him, I
yeah,
thought it was quite
yeah.
funny. But then there's a moment that you just go, oh, mm.
And
And
then
I felt,
she kind of snaps out of it because she said in the book, I'm trying to find out what's wrong with me. And then she says kind of pithily, uh, maybe all that's wrong with me is that I'm bad at picking men.
yeah,
So she
yeah.
kind of, yeah, moved along a little bit there. Yeah.
Yeah, and there is I thought again we can't really talk about it, but I did think the truth about Stan was a bit,
Mm,
especially her observation about it, I thought
mm.
was also kind of maybe not sad, because I think you're
Yeah,
right. He doesn't really deserve our sadness, but there
right.
certainly a moment when you go, oh man, he's become this
Mm,
egotistical
mm.
like dude who thinks he knows everything about everything but actually doesn't know anything about anything.
Right.
And like he's come from, I don't
A
know.
rough backstory. He had a
Yeah,
rough backstory. Yeah.
yeah,
So that softens him. Yeah, I had one interviewer say, "Well, isn't he a jerk?" And I go, "Well, yeah, he's a jerk, but when you find out his story, I think it softens that, right? I think you have some sympathy or empathy for or understanding of him
yeah,
when you
yeah,
find out his story."
yeah. And that kind of to what you said earlier about this truth that some of us carry forward in our lives, like that we've all
Right.
got these truths that may or may not be truths but become truths. It's
Right.
almost like he hasn't carried that forward, right?
No.
It's almost
Right.
like he's that the truth that you would think he would carry forward and tell the world about
Right.
because it would draw more attention to him.
Mm-hmm.
He's moved beyond that, right? Like
Yes.
he's
He-
developed into this character of a human almost by his own making, which
Correct.
is brilliant.
Correct. So when she tells him, confronts him about one of the secrets in his life, and he doesn't want to talk about it, and then she basically says, "Well, he created himself, and he made this person. So why is he going to abandon all the things that worked for him? Why is he going to back away from who he created?" So yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned the mother who is given to us as this kind, beautiful person, which
Mm-hmm.
I thought was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so throughout the novel, there are these comments about beauty. Harriet says, "Here's the thing about beauty: it will
Mm-hmm.
not enable you, save you, or spare you. You may still suffer indignities. You may still be betrayed." I love that so much.
Thank
And
you.
it's like we're all living this life where
Mm-hmm.
we want to be kind, we want to
Yeah.
receive kindness, we want health and longevity, and especially for the people that we love. But for
Mm-hmm.
some reason, we and Harriet and other people get stuck on this external,
Yeah.
not true
Yeah.
reflection of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk to you about that, in
Mm-hmm.
particular, the great moment when Harriet talks about how she would write a 52-year-old protagonist if she were to write a novel. I thought that was
Right.
really good if you want to share that with everybody.
When she says she would not.
No, when she says if I wrote a novel,
Hmm.
I should have written down the page number. She said if I wrote a novel, I would write a 52-year-old. My protagonist would be a 52-year-old woman. Oh man, I should have
With the
written that.
shoes that clicked as she walked across the
Yeah,
floor. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
the
yeah.
the way that she
Yeah,
describes this,
yeah, yeah.
no shits kind of a protagonist.
Yeah. There was another, I'm just going to pick up on your beauty clip. There was another sentence that I really, if I do say so, I liked of my own. When I said that beautiful people don't see you, they see you falling for them.
Right.
And the harder you fall, basically the more in love they are with themselves. So it's, yeah. So yeah, they're not seeing you. They're seeing you
Yeah.
falling for them. So yeah, so the idea of superficial beauty gets kicked around. And Harriet says that she was beautiful once and now she's old and it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
So there was that too. And then when she meets the new man, she says that he's not so beautiful to be dangerous. So
Right.
she likes him.
Yeah. Except he's got a
Hmm,
gun
he's
in
got
his
issues.
car and
He's
he
got a
and
gun in
yeah.
his car. Yeah.
Yeah. And I liked the like throughout Vincent is this character. She compares him to Dante, another man she's had a relationship with. But
Hmm.
I liked the suspicion that was kind of carried through with that character
Right.
because I mean, it not only provided tension, and especially when the gun shows up, it created this kind of like, who is this guy?
Mm-hmm.
But before the gun showed up, she had all of these suspicions, which also kind of reflected back to her, and this feeling of not being worthy, right? Like,
Right.
I'm not
Yes.
worthy of a great relationship, therefore this guy must have secrets. This guy
Right.
must have there must be something wrong with this guy. I thought it was a
Right.
really great choice to have both the
Good.
potential of conflict, like who
Yes.
is this guy really, but also the emotional,
Yes.
there must be something wrong with this guy.
And we kind of leave it up in the air as
Mm,
to who and what he is. There are clues, and because one of Harriet's things is she wants to know how many choices she has left in life, right?
yeah,
She's 52. How many more choices do I have, good or bad? So she notices all these little red flags about Vincent, and she just kind of says, okay, whatever. and and so at the very end of the book, we're not totally clear on Vincent, but as you say, I think it builds up some intrigue and some tension in the book.
yeah. And he's writing, of course, an academic paper on the incident at Shag Harbor, which
Purportedly.
maybe.
Yeah, right.
And I want to talk. We don't have to talk about Shag Harbor, but I
Okay.
wanted to, because when we have those sections where it's a section of real narrative and then a section that is what could have been or what should
Right.
have been. I also kind of thought that played on the Shag Harbor incident, right? For anyone who doesn't know, in October 1967,
Hmm.
unknown object crashed into the waters at Shag Harbor, and all of the stories that are referenced in the book, and maybe not directly, but oh, someone said that they were there and that this happened and that this
Hmm.
happened, that I thought the what could have been also reflected on that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good connection. I mean, it's still a mystery.
Hmm.
The scene where I have in the book where Harriet goes into the museum and the fellow working is Laurie Wickens, and he was the first person, he was the teenager who phoned it. He went to a payphone because that's all they had then. He
Yeah.
phoned into the RCMP and said, "I've seen something." So he had a full career as a fisherman, but now he seems like he's volunteering at the museum all the time.
Hmm.
And this is in his head, right? And so I asked him, I said, well, what do you think it was? And he goes, your guess is as good as mine. So he doesn't
Right.
even know himself now. So it is a big part of the, and as I said, they just had their annual event. They had to have it in Yarmouth to have a bigger venue. So it's very much on people's minds, and it's kind of back in people's consciousness too, the whole business of UFOs and experiencers. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's kind of timely in a way because it's coming back.
Yeah. And it's funny because, in the, I don't know, 80s, 90s,
Mm,
people like me would
mhm.
probably describe them as, conspiracy theorists and,
Yeah,
whackos
kooks.
who think that there
Yeah.
are UFOs. But you're right.
Mm.
It's like
Well, I think there was an American astronaut who said that he saw something and he
yeah,
believes it. So yeah, it's not the same. Like you said, there was a phase where everybody was a kook and they were
yeah.
conspiracy nut, and now people are saying, well, I don't know.
Well, because
Not really sure.
because the more we go into space, the more we discover about
Yeah,
space, the more you're like, oh,
yeah,
okay. If
yeah, maybe.
if
Hmm.
we as a species are smart enough,
Hmm.
intelligent enough to figure out how to get to Mars, there must be a more intelligent species out there that
Yeah, yeah.
have
So
figured out.
yeah. So I think it's actually come back into fashion, the UFO story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
No, that's great. And
yeah.
then, Claire, I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. I just have another sort of writerly question, but
Okay,
if we have any questions from the audience, you can put it into the chat, and I'll try and see it, or Claire can jump on
okay.
and see it. Um, but I want to talk about the end notes. Uh,
Oh,
the-
yes, yes, yes.
these were also things that were like, come here, come here, come here, come here. I got to read you this. I got to read you this.
Mm, mm.
So I want to talk about that because they are also very related, usually to something very funny in the narrative.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about how you knew or when you decided, I'm going to put this as an end note. It's going to be a completely separate thing. I'm not going to include
Mm.
the narrative.
I thought that was a very daring move on my part, but I'm very happy with it. So yeah, to explain to anybody who hasn't read the book, so there'll be a mention of Sidney Crosby, who's the big hero in Dartmouth, and then instead of explaining it, there'll be a footnote: Sidney Crosby, da 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 da, and often they're humorous, but they're all true. So it's factual information about Sidney Crosby, and I just originally, I'll confess, they were going to be in the back of the book altogether. And then Goose Lane thought it would be better to have them on the individual pages. So
Yeah.
I think that was a good choice. And I think they add most of them are humorous. So I think even though they're factual, I think they add a little something different. And I don't know that I've ever read a novel with endnotes. So I thought, why not, Elaine?
You didn't
Why don't you do that? So I did it.
you didn't try to read Infinite Jest. You're not one of those people.
Oh, no, 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 sorry.
No,
Yeah.
I got to
Yeah.
page, I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, this is recreate page 50 or page 75. I got to
Sure.
the scene where he was in the dean's office
Oh, yes.
talking about his tennis career, and we were there
Right. Right.
for so many pages. I was
Yeah.
like, no, I can't.
So, okay, so I didn't invent it, but I went with it.
Yeah.
I went with it, and I just thought, yeah, I want to do this. So once I
Yep.
get going, it was fun. I did like the little one about Sid getting fined once for squirting a goalie with a water bottle. I
Yeah.
thought that, which was true. The most handsome man in hockey at the time. Um, anyway, the
Somebody
sweet
somebody squirted him in the face.
Sid squirted somebody, which was quite un-Sid-like.
Right.
Anyway, they are true. All of the end notes are true. So,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit you can even hear about Dartmouth's amalgamation, and yeah. So the end notes were fun, but they were originally going to be in the back, and then we put them on the pages with the in context.
Yeah. I like that. I like
Yeah,
the,
thank
yeah.
you.
I like
I
that.
like it too.
Being able, I mean, they're a digression in and of themselves,
Yeah, yeah,
and notes have the potential to pull you
yeah,
out,
yeah,
take you down a
I-
rabbit hole on the internet.
yeah.
But
I
I like
factored
to
that
put in
in.
there. Yeah,
Factored that in, and I said, "To hell with that. Let's go."
yeah, yeah. No, it was great. So Henrik Lundqvist is
Yeah,
David's put in the comments. I guess that's
that
the
was the most. Was the most
yeah.
handsome man in hockey, and he has an identical twin. He has an identical twin.
Yeah,
So life's not fair.
yeah. Oh, and Kevin says there's a book by Nabokov that's about half endnotes. Oh my
Oh, excellent. Okay, I should expand my horizons. Good.
yeah. If it's half
Nabokov.
endnotes, then
Yeah.
that would be challenging.
Yeah, that would
Um,
be. Yeah,
so
mine are sparse. I don't have that many endnotes.
yeah, no, they're good. It's they feed the novel perfectly well.
Thank you.
We don't have any questions from anybody, so I
Okay.
want to talk to you about what you're working on. As you know, I'm a lover of short stories. I am
Yeah.
a particular lover of your short stories. For anyone watching this, if you're a short story writer, you must get Raphael Has Pretty Eyes and read it because it really and truly is, as I said to Elaine ahead of this conversation, that it is one of my go-to reference books when I'm stuck on a
Thank you.
particular short story. So I want
Thank
to
you
talk to
so
you about what
much.
you're working on right now.
I go back and forth generally between short stories and novels.
Mhm.
So now that this novel is done and launched, I'm going back to my vice, which is writing short stories.
Yay.
So, as I think I mentioned the first, I have one in here. It's called Father Eduardo. It's kind of sinister. So this one is in, they did a cool illustration to go with it. I don't know if you can see
Oh,
that.
nice.
Yeah, they did a cool.
What magazine is it?
This is Camel, and it's brand new, and it's out of Fredericton. Mark Jarman and Clissa Hurley are the editors. And yeah, it comes out. So I'm back writing short stories, and this one is the first one um, that I've
I think
published.
Claire put a link to the journal in the top of the
Oh,
chat for anyone who's
lovely, lovely. So I'm
watching.
back doing that. So I have that one is done, and I have about a couple others almost done.
Mhm.
And yeah, and ideas for other short stories. So that's what I'm working on these days.
Nice.
Yeah.
That is very exciting for me, who is a lover of short stories. So
Yeah, yeah. They're so much fun when they come together. Like it's
yeah,
just okay. There's your point. Like I tend to take a rather circuitous route, and then I try to like it all comes together at the end when it works. And that's my Pale Fire is an Nabokov book. Look, I'm learning stuff here
all
tonight.
right, nice.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, I will look for that. Hmm. So that's what I'm doing. I'm writing short stories again and
Perfect.
talking a little bit about the gift child with various audiences. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I am very grateful that we got to chat again for a little bit longer than we chatted the last time.
Mm-hmm.
This novel really, really, and truly is a gift to the canon. I said it in my post, and I really mean it. The sentences and like there's just perfection on so many levels. I urge everyone to read it. But Elaine, thank you for coming. Thank you to
Yes.
everyone who's here right now for coming. Thank you to everyone who's watching this on YouTube. We meet again in person at Type Books on November 10th with Damian Tarnopolsky, Jess Taylor, and Anna Dowdle. And then we're back here on Zoom on November 24th with Sheila James, another Goose Lane author with
Mm.
Outcast. And
Mm-hmm.
I, of course, do the first 30 on November 14th with Deborah Kimmett, who is a comedian, um, which I'm looking forward to. So that's it, unless you have a little nugget of something to share with everybody. We will.
No, I just want to thank you for inviting me, and I had a lovely time. And yeah, I hope everybody reads The Gift Child.
Thank you. I hope so too.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Claire, for stepping in and doing such a fantastic job. I think Kaylee would be very proud of everything that you've done there. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Yeah,
Take care.
bye.
Bye.